The winter of 1873 laid its frozen fingers across the Arizona territory with unusual spite, turning the normally temperate trading post of Prescott into an icebound outpost that seemed more fitting for the Dakota Plains. Ethan Mitchell stood at his cabin window, watching fat snowflakes spiral down through the pre-dawn gloom while his coffee cooled untouched beside him. The strange weather matched his mood. Unsettled and out of place, like the territory itself wasn't sure what it wanted to be. 20 years of frontier life had carved deep lines around Ethan's eyes and streaked his dark hair with gray. But at 45, he still moved with the fluid grace of the cavalry scout he'd once been. That life seemed distant now, though his skills hadn't dulled. If anything, the isolation of his homestead had honed them to a razor's edge. He could read the land like others read books, sensing its moods and movements in ways that sometimes unsettled even him. The sound of hoofbeats pulled him from his reverie, an unusual occurrence this early, especially in such weather. Through the swirling snow, he made out two riders approaching at a gallop. One was Benjamin Turner, the young deputy who served under Marshal Phillips. The other was Helen Roberts, whose family ran the trading post by the Verde River crossing. Their urgent pace suggested trouble. "Ethan, thank God you're up," Helen called as she dismounted, her face flushed with cold and exertion. "Clara's missing. My sister. She rode out yesterday morning to check our trap lines upriver and never came back. With this storm moving in—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew what a blizzard could do to someone caught unprepared in the wilderness. Benjamin shifted in his saddle, frost crusting his mustache. "Marshall's organizing search parties, but most folks are saying it's already too late. Trail's probably covered by now, and more snow coming. But Helen said you might be able to help. Said you know these lands better than anyone." The young deputy's tone carried equal measures of hope and skepticism. Ethan moved with practiced efficiency, gathering his winter gear and checking his rifle. He'd known Clara Roberts since she was a girl, watched her grow into one of the most capable woodswomen in the territory. If anyone could survive a night in this weather, it would be her. But even the most skilled could fall victim to bad luck or worse. The tensions with local tribes had been growing steadily worse over the past months. As he saddled his horse, Ethan's mind drifted to the previous winter and his encounter with the old Sioux medicine man. The mysterious gift he'd received then, the ability to sense and communicate with animals in ways that defied explanation, might be Clara's only hope now, but using it meant risking exposure, and he knew all too well how the territorial authorities would try to exploit such an advantage. The storm intensified as they rode out, wind-driven snow reducing visibility to mere yards. Ethan led them along the river, relying more on memory and instinct than sight. He reached out with his other senses, the ones the medicine man had awakened, feeling for any trace of human presence in the wild. A flash of awareness touched his mind. The nervous energy of a young doe, memories of a woman's passage the day before. They found Clara's first campsite near noon, the remains of a small fire almost completely buried in fresh snow. Ethan knelt, brushing away the white powder to reveal signs that raised his hackles. The ashes had been scattered, not by wind, but by deliberate action. Nearby, partially obscured tracks told a story that made his blood run cold. Clara hadn't been alone. "Looks like she had company," Benjamin observed, hand resting on his revolver. "Indian sign?" The question carried weight. If Native Americans were involved, the territorial militia would use it as an excuse for the kind of retribution they'd been itching to deliver. Ethan studied the tracks carefully before answering, buying time to decide how much truth to reveal. "These aren't hostile signs," he said finally. "Look here." They helped her move camp, probably when the storm started coming in. "These are Yavapai tracks, and they're at peace with us right now." Helen's face showed relief, but Benjamin remained skeptical. "Marshall won't like hearing Indians are involved, peaceful or not. He's under pressure from the territorial governor to show results after those raids last month." The deputy's words carried an unspoken warning. This situation could easily spiral into violence if handled wrongly. Ethan stood, brushing snow from his clothes as he considered their options. His gift told him Clara was alive, moving with the Yavapai group for protection. But from what? The animals of the forest were unusually quiet, and even through the storm he could sense their fear. Something was hunting in these woods, something that walked on two legs but carried the spirit of a predator. As if in answer to his thoughts, a distant wolf's howl cut through the storm. To ordinary ears, it would have sounded natural, but Ethan's enhanced senses detected the artifice, a human signal meant to deceive. The real wolves had fled this area days ago, driven by the same presence that now stalked them all. This was going to be far more than a simple rescue mission. The snow swirled around Ethan as he gestured for the deputy to take shelter in the abandoned trapper's cabin they'd discovered. Inside, he unfolded the crude map Benjamin had given him before they'd left Prescott. The trading routes along the Verde River were clearly marked, but the territory where the Yavapai were known to camp remained frustratingly vague. His newfound ability to sense animals' movements had led them this far, but the unnatural silence in these woods troubled him deeply. The deputy stirred the embers of the previous occupant's fire, his weathered face illuminated by the fresh flames. "Marshal Alexander won't wait much longer before sending in the militia," he said quietly. "There's talk in Flagstaff that some of the settlers are forming their own search parties, if they find the Yavapai first." He left the grim implications unspoken. Ethan knew the locals' idea of justice rarely involved asking questions. Through his connection with the forest creatures, Ethan had pieced together fragments of what happened the night Clara disappeared. The deer had seen torch-bearing men speaking a mix of English and Spanish, not the Yavapai tongue. The owls had watched riders moving east toward Globe, but their paths had been erratic, designed to mislead. Something about this situation felt orchestrated, as if Clara's disappearance was merely one thread in a larger web. A scratching at the cabin door drew Ethan's attention. He opened it to find a half-starved coyote, its ribs visible beneath matted fur. Under normal circumstances, the creature would never approach human dwellings, but the gift bestowed by the old medicine man allowed Ethan to sense its desperate purpose. Images flowed between them. Riders wearing distinctive serapes, the glint of Mexican silver spurs, the smell of mesquite smoke from a hidden camp. "There's a band of raiders using the tension between settlers and tribes to cover their true activities," Ethan explained to the deputy. "They're counting on everyone blaming the Yavapai while they run their operation." He paused, watching the coyote lap water from a tin cup. Clara saw something she wasn't supposed to. The Yavapai didn't take her. They're protecting her from the same men who've been staging the raids. The deputy's expression darkened. "Noah's gang. They've been working both sides of the border, stirring up trouble. Marshal Alexander suspected they were behind the raids, but could never prove it." He checked his ammunition with practiced efficiency. "If they're holding up near Globe, they'll be using the old copper mine trails. Hard country, easy to defend." Ethan focused his thoughts, reaching out to the scattered wildlife in the area. An eagle soaring high above the storm clouds showed him a column of smoke rising from a box canyon. Prairie dogs reported the vibrations of horses moving along hidden paths. Even the rattlesnakes, dormant in their winter dens, retained memories of men's boots passing overhead. "We need to move fast," Ethan said, gathering his gear. "Not just for Clara's sake. If Noah's men succeed in provoking a war between the settlers and the tribes, the whole territory will burn." He hesitated, then added, "The medicine man who gave me this gift, he said it came with a responsibility. Maybe this is what he meant. Not just understanding the animals, but using that knowledge to protect both sides from those who'd profit from their destruction." The deputy nodded grimly. "I'll send word to Marshal Alexander. Let him know what we've discovered." "But Ethan," he gripped the younger man's arm. "Watch yourself. Noah's reputation isn't just for violence. They say he has his own kind of medicine. Dark stuff that even the tribes won't touch." Outside, the storm was intensifying, but Ethan could still sense the coyote's eagerness to guide them. The creature understood more than its wild nature should allow. Another sign that forces beyond the ordinary were at work in these mountains. As they prepared to leave the cabin's shelter, Ethan silently renewed the promise he'd made to the old medicine man. To use his gift not for power, but for balance. The animals had shown him the truth behind Clara's disappearance. Now they would help him set things right, no matter what supernatural forces stood in his way. The blizzard's fury had subsided, but Ethan Mitchell knew the Sioux medicine man's teachings would be tested sooner than he'd expected. Standing at the wind-worn dock in Globe, he watched ice floes crash against the trading post's wooden pylons, while Alexander Turner, the territorial militia captain, outlined his proposition. The captain's words felt like bitter medicine going down. They wanted Ethan's newfound ability to track native movements through his connection with the animals. Helen Roberts clutched her shawl against the biting wind as she approached the two men. As the trading post's record keeper, she'd witnessed the growing tensions between settlers and tribes firsthand. Her eyes met Ethan's, conveying silent understanding of his impossible position. They'd grown close during the long winter months, after he'd brought the wounded medicine man to her door. The medicine man's gift had manifested gradually in Ethan's consciousness, first as whispered fragments of animal thoughts, then as clear impressions of their movements and intentions. Through the eyes of circling hawks and the sensitive noses of deer, he could read the landscape like a living map. But the medicine man had been clear. This was a gift for harmony with the land, not a weapon to be wielded against its people. Captain Turner grew impatient with Ethan's hesitation. Two families have gone missing near Prescott, the Perez children and Clara Phillips. The tribes know something, Mitchell. You help us track them, or I'll have no choice but to treat you as sympathetic to hostiles. The threat hung in the air like wood smoke, acrid and choking. Ethan recalled the medicine man's words about balance and consequences. A red-tailed hawk screamed overhead, and Ethan felt its urgent message. Riders approaching from the north, many horses moving fast through the snow-laden valleys. Through the hawk's keen vision, he glimpsed something unexpected. Not war parties, but families fleeing, including white children bundled against the cold. The story wasn't what it seemed. Benjamin Phillips burst into the trading post, his face flushed with exertion. "Captain, bandits raided the northern settlements. White men dressed as natives." The revelation sparked murmurs through the gathered crowd. Helen's quills scratched furiously as she documented the testimony. Ethan felt the truth of it resonating through his animal connections. The land itself seemed to confirm the deception. The real perpetrators were a gang led by Jacob Turner, the captain's own brother, who'd been staging raids disguised as natives to justify a military response. Through scattered whispers from prairie dogs and wolves, Ethan had pieced together their movements. The missing families weren't captives of the tribes. They were witnesses being held to prevent exposure of the plot. Frances Mitchell, Ethan's sister who served as the settlement's schoolteacher, added crucial information. The Perez children mentioned seeing white men painting their faces before the attack. Her testimony carried weight. She'd taught both missing families, knew their habits and relationships. The pieces were falling into place, but proving it would require Ethan to fully embrace his gift. Using his connection with a family of wolves, Ethan located the bandits' hideout in an abandoned mining camp near Flagstaff. The animals painted a clear picture: armed men, frightened children, provisions for a long stay. But Captain Turner's suspicious gaze suggested he already knew about his brother's involvement and was hoping to use Ethan's abilities to eliminate both the witnesses and the tribes in one swift campaign. Noah Roberts, Helen's brother and the local physician, had treated the medicine man during his recovery. He pulled Ethan aside with grave news. The old man spoke of a price for using the gift against its purpose. The animals may grant you their sight, but turn it to violence and they'll abandon you forever. The weight of the choice pressed down like winter frost on a new grass. Alice Turner, the captain's wife, secretly sought out Ethan as darkness fell. Her conscience had finally overcome family loyalty. Jacob was always violent, even as a child. Alexander covered for him, helped him escape justice. "I can't bear it anymore." Her testimony would help, but Ethan knew the real proof would come from his animal allies. The next morning, as mist rose from the river, Ethan made his decision. He would use his gift one final time, not to harm, but to save. Through the eyes of eagles and the silent padding of the mountain lions, he would lead a rescue party to the mining camp. The animals would help him free the captives, but after that, he would have to find a new way to bridge the divide between two worlds. As dawn painted the river valley in watercolor hues, Ethan crouched by the water's edge, his consciousness merging with a circling hawk. Through its keen eyes, he spotted the mining camp tucked into a remote bend of the river, where Alexander's militia kept their native prisoners. The sight made his stomach turn. Women and children huddled in makeshift pens, while armed men patrolled the perimeter with rifles glinting in the early light. Frances, the young Sioux girl who had helped him understand the medicine man's teachings, appeared silently beside him. "The spirits are restless," she whispered, reading the agitation in nearby songbirds. "They sense violence approaching." Ethan nodded grimly. He had felt it too. a growing tension in the animal world that mirrored his own internal struggle. Back in Prescott, Noah worked to gather allies among the more moderate townspeople. The merchant had risked his standing in the community by openly questioning Alexander's authority, but his reputation for fairness drew others to the cause. Clara, the schoolteacher, had begun documenting the militia's abuses in carefully detailed letters to territorial officials. The journey to Globe would take 3 days, following the twisting river through dangerous canyon country. Ethan knew Alexander's men would be watching the main trails, so he would need to rely on his animal guides to find safe passage. A family of wolves had already shown him hidden paths through the rocks, while watchful ravens promised to warn of approaching patrols. Helen, the medicine man's granddaughter, insisted on joining the rescue party despite Ethan's protests. "My grandfather's power flows in my veins too," she said firmly. "The animals know me." Her knowledge of traditional healing would prove vital if they encountered resistance, and her presence might help calm the frightened captives. The preparations had to be made in absolute secrecy. Benjamin, a former cavalry scout who had grown disgusted with the militia's brutality, provided detailed information about the camp's defenses. "Jacob's getting desperate," he warned. "He knows the territorial governor is starting to ask questions. He'll do anything to keep his prisoners hidden." Through the eyes of a mountain lion, Ethan watched Jacob and his men drinking around their campfire, boasting of past violence. The big cat's contempt matched his own. These were not hunters but mere killers, without honor or respect for the natural world. The animals would help him stop them, but he had to be worthy of their trust. Alice's revelation about Jacob's past had shaken the community. Other witnesses began coming forward with stories of cruelty and corruption. Alexander's grip on power started showing cracks, but like a wounded predator, this only made him more dangerous. His men now patrolled Prescott streets openly, watching for signs of dissent. The rescue party gathered in the pre-dawn darkness near the river ford. Noah had secured supplies through his trading contacts, while Clara provided detailed maps showing little-known trails. Francis and Helen moved among the horses, calming them with soft words and gentle touches. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settling over him like a heavy blanket. Through his connection with the animals, he sensed the changing seasons. Winter's grip slowly loosening, new life stirring beneath the soil. The medicine man had taught him that all things were connected, that violence against one was violence against all. As he prepared to lead his companions into danger, Ethan silently renewed his vow to use his gift only for healing, never for harm. The morning mist still clung to the river as they mounted up and moved out, following the silent guidance of hawk and wolf. Somewhere ahead lay Globe and its dark secrets, but also the chance for justice and reconciliation. The animals would show them the way, but the harder journey would be in their own hearts, finding the courage to stand against hatred and fear. The first signs of trouble appeared as they approached the narrow canyon leading to Globe. A lone coyote materialized from the scrub brush, its movements conveying an urgency that only Ethan could fully comprehend. Through their silent communion, he understood. Armed men were watching the main trail, waiting in ambush. He raised his hand, bringing their small party to a halt as Francis and Helen exchanged worried glances. "There's another way," Clara whispered, unfolding one of her carefully drawn maps. Her finger traced a faint line through a maze of dry washes and steep ravines. "It'll take us half a day longer, but it bypasses the lookout points." The others gathered close, their horses shifting restlessly beneath them as they sensed their rider's tension. Through his heightened awareness, Ethan felt their nervous energy like ripples across still water. The detour took them through treacherous terrain where ancient floods had carved deep channels through the rock. Helen's medical supplies clinked softly in her saddlebags as their mounts picked their way carefully over loose shale. Above them, a red-tailed hawk circled, the same one that had been following their progress since dawn. Its presence reassured Ethan. The medicine man had taught him that such spirit guides appeared when they were needed most. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they made camp in a sheltered box canyon. Francis tended the horses while Clara sketched new details onto her maps by firelight. The evening air carried strange sounds, not just coyotes and nightbirds, but distant voices carried on the wind. The blizzard had finally subsided, leaving Ethan Mitchell and the elderly Sioux medicine man, whom he now knew as Singing Crow, huddled in the cramped root cellar beneath the homestead. The gift of animal speech that the medicine man had shared was no longer just a curiosity. It had become their lifeline. Through the bitter weeks of winter, the prairie dogs had warned of approaching storms, and the elk had guided them to sheltered valleys where food could still be found. But now, as spring's first tentative warmth began to thaw the frozen earth, Ethan found himself facing an impossible choice. Captain Benjamin Turner of the Territorial Militia had arrived at his door flanked by two grim-faced soldiers. They knew somehow about Ethan's newfound ability, and they wanted to use it to track down what they called hostile Sioux camps along the river trading routes near Prescott. "Think about it, Mitchell," Turner had said, his voice carrying an edge of threat beneath its reasonable tone. "You help us locate these savages, and you'll be well compensated. Refuse, and we might have to take a closer look at how you've been harboring one of them all winter." The captain's cold eyes had flickered toward the root cellar door, where Singing Crow lay hidden. Through his connection with the animals, Ethan had learned that Noah Phillips, a young settler's son, had been taken during a raid 2 weeks prior. But the story wasn't as simple as the militia claimed. The wolves had witnessed the boy willingly following a Sioux hunting party after his father, Alexander Phillips, had beaten him nearly to death in a drunken rage. That evening, as Ethan tended to his horses, a fox brought news that made his blood run cold. The militia wasn't actually searching for Noah. They were using the boy's disappearance as an excuse to launch a campaign against all Sioux camps in the territory. Turner's real mission was to clear the valuable river trading routes for white settlers, regardless of the cost in native lives. Singing Crow sat by the fire, his weathered face grave as Ethan shared what he'd learned. "The spirits did not give you this gift to bring death to my people," the old man said quietly. "But neither did they give it so you could stand idle while an innocent boy suffers. What does your heart tell you, friend?" The answer came to Ethan through an unexpected source. A great horned owl landed on his windowsill, its ancient eyes holding wisdom deeper than human understanding. Through their silent communion, Ethan saw a way forward, dangerous, but true to both his conscience and his debt to Singing Crow. Under cover of darkness, Ethan slipped away from his homestead, guided by the owl's night vision and the wolves' intimate knowledge of the terrain. The animals led him to a hidden valley where Noah had indeed found refuge with a small band of Sioux families. The boy's bruises had faded, but the fear in his eyes when Ethan mentioned returning home told its own story. Frances Turner, the captain's wife, had always been different from her harsh husband. When Ethan secretly brought her evidence of Alexander Phillips' abuse, along with testimony from other settlers who'd witnessed the man's violent outbursts, she understood what needed to be done. As the wife of a prominent militia officer, her word carried weight with the territorial authorities. While Frances worked to have Noah legally removed from his father's custody, Ethan used his gift to orchestrate a subtle deception. With the help of the region's wildlife, he led Turner's militia on a series of false trails, always seeming to just miss their quarry, while actually guiding them far from the true locations of Sioux camps. The strain of maintaining the charade wore on Ethan. Each night he would return home exhausted, knowing that one slip could bring destruction down on innocent people. But the animals continued to aid him, their loyalty unwavering. Ravens watched the militia's movements, prairie dogs carried messages between scattered native families, and elk created false tracks to reinforce his misdirection. Clara Roberts, a young widow who ran the trading post in Prescott, became an unexpected ally. She had her own reasons to distrust the militia after they'd failed to protect her husband from outlaws the previous year. Through her network of contacts, she helped spread word up and down the river, warning native communities of the militia's true intentions. The crisis came to a head when Alexander Phillips, driven mad by drink and rage, attempted to burn down Clara's trading post, believing she was part of a conspiracy to keep his son from him. As the flames spread, it was the very people Phillips had vilified who helped save the town. Sioux warriors riding in from nearby camps to join the Bucket Brigade, proving through actions rather than words the humanity that Turner's militia denied them. In the chaos of that night, watched over by countless animal eyes, Ethan made his final move. With Frances Turner's help, he arranged for Noah to be officially placed in Clara's care, while evidence of Phillips' crimes was too overwhelming to ignore. The militia's pretext for their campaign crumbled, and Turner was forced to withdraw his men or risk exposing the true nature of his mission. Singing Crow emerged from hiding as spring fully arrived, his eyes twinkling with approval at how his student had used the sacred gift. "You have learned that power is best wielded not as a weapon," he said, "but as a thread to weave people together." Around them, the animals of the prairie moved freely between settler and native camps, ignoring the artificial boundaries humans tried to impose on the land. As summer approached, Ethan found himself increasingly caught between two worlds. The gift of animal communication had changed him profoundly, revealing layers of consciousness in the landscape he'd never before perceived. From the eagles soaring overhead to the wolves prowling the river valleys, every creature now spoke to him of movement, of danger, of opportunity. But with this awareness came a weight of responsibility he hadn't anticipated. The territorial governor had sent new orders to Francis Turner, demanding that someone with Ethan's unique tracking abilities assist in mapping Native American movements along the river systems. The official documents spoke of ensuring peaceful coexistence, but Ethan knew the truth. They wanted to use his gift to control and contain the indigenous peoples who had called these lands home for generations. Clara, who had taken in young Noah and given him a chance at a new life, understood Ethan's dilemma better than most. Sometimes the hardest choices, she told him one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the river gold, are between two kinds of loyalty. Her words echoed those of Singing Crow, who had warned that power misused could sever the delicate threads connecting all living things. In Prescott, tensions mounted as summer storms brought flash floods to the region. Ethan's ability to communicate with animals proved invaluable as he warned settlers of rising waters, working with beaver colonies to identify weak points in the riverbanks. But each success made him more visible, harder to hide from those who would exploit his gift. One moonless night, a lone wolf brought him news that changed everything. A group of displaced Sioux families, including children and elders, had become trapped between the rising river and Turner's militia patrols. They were trying to reach their traditional hunting grounds near Globe, but the usual paths were now blocked by settler expansions and military checkpoints. Working in secret, Ethan enlisted the help of Francis, who had grown increasingly disillusioned with Turner's methods. Together, they devised a plan that would require every skill Ethan had learned from both his worlds. The local animals would create diversions, leading Turner's patrols on false trails, while Francis used her influence to ensure certain guard posts would be temporarily unmanned. Through the eyes of circling hawks and the whispered messages of darting foxes, Ethan guided the Sioux families along hidden paths. The journey became a testament to the interconnectedness Singing Crow had tried to teach him. Settler and native, human and animal, all moving as one through the living landscape. Even Noah contributed, using his young voice to mimic coyote calls that helped mask the sound of passing feet. The final test came at dawn, as the group approached the safety of their allies near Globe. Turner himself had grown suspicious and led a patrol dangerously close to their position. It was then that Ethan fully embraced the power of his gift, not as a weapon but as a bridge. He called to every creature within reach, deer, rabbit, bird, and bear, asking them to move as they naturally would, but in patterns that would draw attention away from the fleeing families. The symphony of animal movement that followed was like nothing any witness would ever forget. Turner's men found themselves surrounded by a seemingly impossible convergence of wildlife, each creature acting with purpose, but in ways that defied military logic. In the confusion, the Sioux families slipped away, leaving Turner with nothing but tracks that led everywhere and nowhere. Standing on a ridge overlooking the river valley days later, Ethan watched eagles soar above the merging waters. Singing Crow appeared beside him, as he often did, though whether in person or spirit had become increasingly difficult to distinguish. But as he listened to the voices of the land, hawk and wolf, river and wind, he knew he had found his true path. With Clara's help, he established a remote homestead that became a quiet waypoint for those seeking to cross between worlds, guided by the wisdom of the animals who recognized no borders. The first winter snow was falling as Ethan Mitchell made his final desperate ride toward Prescott, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. The territorial militia's ultimatum echoed in his mind: help them track the Sioux bands they claimed were hostile, or face prosecution for harboring Cloud Speaker, the medicine man who had shared with him the sacred gift of animal speech. The elderly healer's words still rang in his ears. The spirits choose their vessels with purpose, not for the gains of men who seek power. Along the banks of the Verde River, where trading posts stood as lonely sentinels against the wilderness, Ethan found unexpected allies. Benjamin Turner, a French-speaking fur trader who had married into the Sioux Nation, recognized the militia's true intentions. They seek not peace but conquest, he warned, his weathered face grave in the lamplight. They will use your gift to destroy those they cannot control. The situation grew more complex when Clara Phillips, the daughter of the militia commander, sought Ethan out in secret. Her brother Noah had disappeared while tracking a Sioux hunting party, and her father's grief had twisted into a vengeful obsession. He's not himself anymore, she confessed, tears freezing on her cheeks. He'll destroy everything to find Noah, even if it means burning the whole territory to ash. In the depths of that bitter winter, Ethan discovered that Noah Phillips hadn't been taken by the Sioux at all. Through his gift, he communicated with a young wolf who had witnessed Noah's true fate, a fall from a cliff while pursuing a deer, his body now lying in a remote canyon. The revelation would shatter the militia's pretense for their campaign, but delivering this truth would expose Ethan's supernatural ability to those who would abuse it. Alexander Perez, an aging scout who had once guided wagon trains, offered Ethan sanctuary at his remote cabin. "The gift you carry," he said, stoking the fire as wind howled outside. "It's like a flame in darkness. Some will seek its warmth, others will try to steal it, and many will fear it enough to try to extinguish it forever." His words carried the weight of similar experiences, though he kept his own secrets close. Through his connection with the animals, Ethan learned of other missing settlers, not victims of native raids, but souls lost to the harsh realities of frontier life. A family of 4, frozen in a makeshift shelter. A prospector trapped in a mine collapse. 2 young brothers swept away by spring floods. The truth was far more complex than the militia's simple narrative of savagery and civilization. Frances Roberts, a Sioux woman married to a trader, became an unexpected bridge between worlds. She helped Ethan understand that his gift wasn't meant to serve either side of the conflict, but to reveal the deeper truths that connected all living things. "The animals don't see borders or badges," she explained. "They see only the flow of life itself, the balance that keeps us all alive." The crisis came to a head when Commander Phillips ordered a raid on a peaceful Sioux winter camp. Ethan knew he had to act. Working with Clara, Benjamin, and Francis, he devised a plan to lead the militia to Noah's body while protecting both the Sioux people and his secret. The animals would help create a trail that only he could follow, one that would reveal the truth without exposing its source. Through a blinding snowstorm, Ethan guided the militia party, including the commander and Clara, to the canyon where Noah lay. The wolves had protected the body, and tracks in the snow told the story of an accident, not an attack. Commander Phillips, confronted with the truth of his son's fate, broke down in the snow. Clara held her father as he wept, the weight of his misplaced vengeance finally lifting. In the aftermath, Ethan chose to leave Prescott, knowing his gift would always draw unwanted attention. He traveled north with Cloud Speaker, who had emerged from hiding to continue teaching him the ancient ways. Together, they established a remote trading post where all were welcome: settlers, natives, and the animals whose voices had revealed a path to peace. The gift of animal speech remained a secret, but its influence rippled outward, healing old wounds and building bridges between divided peoples. Years later, Clara Phillips would sometimes visit the trading post, bringing news from Prescott and sharing stories of how her father had changed, becoming an advocate for peaceful coexistence. The animals still spoke to Ethan, their wisdom growing deeper with each passing season. He had learned that the greatest power of his gift lay not in its utility for tracking or hunting, but in its ability to reveal the interconnected nature of all living things. The legacy of that winter lived on in unexpected ways. Benjamin Turner's children grew up speaking to animals in their dreams, though never as clearly as Ethan could. Frances Roberts established a school where both native and settler children learned to respect the wisdom of the natural world. And somewhere in the high country, Cloud Speaker's teachings continued to shape a new generation of those who could hear the voices carried on the wind. As autumn painted the cottonwoods along the river in shades of gold, Ethan found himself drawn back to the trading post where his journey had begun. The wooden planks of the dock creaked beneath his feet as he watched the current sweep past, carrying fallen leaves downstream toward Yuma. He'd received word that Alexander, the territorial militia captain who had once demanded his help in tracking native peoples, had returned to the area seeking reconciliation. The meeting took place on neutral ground, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient sycamore where Frances Roberts had first taught local children about the interconnected web of life. Alexander's face had weathered with the years, his once rigid posture softened by time and reflection. He spoke of how witnessing Ethan's stand against violence had transformed his own understanding of justice and peace. Benjamin Turner's trading post had grown into a thriving center of commerce and cultural exchange. Native artisans displayed their wares alongside settler goods, while multilingual conversations filled the air. Helen, Benjamin's wife, had become known for her healing practice that blended Western medicine with indigenous knowledge, drawing patients from as far as Globe and Flagstaff. The animals still brought Ethan messages, but now they spoke of hope more often than warning. A young eagle told him of new births in the high country, while the wolves shared tales of territories where different packs had learned to hunt in harmony. Even the wary coyotes, once his most cryptic teachers, now approached with open trust, sharing ancient stories passed down through generations. Noah, who had once been skeptical of Ethan's gift, had become one of its strongest defenders. His small ranch near Prescott served as a sanctuary where injured wildlife could heal and where people could learn to listen to the quiet voices of the natural world. Anna, his daughter, showed signs of inheriting a similar sensitivity, often knowing when animals were in distress before anyone else noticed. The harshness of that transformative winter had given way to a different kind of survival, one based on understanding rather than conflict. Jacob, the former scout who had initially doubted Ethan's change of heart, now regularly brought his grandchildren to learn from the man who could speak with animals. Their wide-eyed wonder reminded Ethan of his own first moments of revelation in Cloudspeaker's presence. As the years passed, the trading post became a gathering place for those seeking to bridge the divide between worlds. Alice, a young Sioux woman who had traveled far to learn from Ethan, proved to have an even stronger gift for animal communication. Under his guidance, she began teaching others, ensuring that Cloudspeaker's wisdom would continue to spread like ripples across still water. The territorial authorities eventually recognized the value of peaceful coexistence, establishing new policies that respected both settler and native rights. Ethan's quiet influence had helped demonstrate that understanding could accomplish what force could not. The animals had taught him that true power lay not in domination, but in the ability to listen and learn from all voices, whether they spoke with human words or not. In the end, Ethan's impossible choice had led to an unexpected path of healing. The trading post stood as a testament to what could be achieved when people chose to hear the wisdom carried on the wind and in the hearts of all living things. As he watched another sunset paint the river in crimson and gold, he understood that his gift had never been meant for tracking or hunting, but for building bridges between all those who shared this vast and beautiful land. The legacy of that winter continued to grow, like seeds scattered on fertile ground. Future generations would speak of how a single act of compassion during a blizzard had changed the course of countless lives, human and animal alike. And in the quiet moments before dawn, when the world held its breath between night and day, the voices of the animals still sang their ancient songs of unity and peace. As spring melted into summer, Ethan's trading post along the river became more than just a place of commerce. It transformed into a sanctuary where both settlers and Sioux could meet in peace. The lessons learned from that fateful winter blizzard had rippled outward like circles in still water, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. Benjamin, the territorial militia captain who had once demanded Ethan's help in tracking tribes, now regularly visited the post not as a soldier, but as a student eager to learn the ancient ways of communication. The medicine man who Ethan had rescued, now known to him as Noah, continued to teach him the deeper mysteries of their shared gift. Together they would sit by the riverbank at dawn, listening to the complex languages of the wild, the warning calls of prairie dogs, the triumphant songs of returning geese, and the quiet wisdom of ancient cottonwoods whose roots drank deep from the river's flow.